One.
Okay, good afternoon and welcome to this meeting of the Joint Legislative Management Oversight Committee. We have members of the House and Senate who serve on this committee. It is March 11th. We have two items on the agenda today. We'll be hearing from Catherine Benham from the Joint Fiscal Office about recent explorations of legislative space needs and a proposed new study to address short and long-term needs for space as we come out of the pandemic. And then after that, we'll be discussing a personnel matter. So we will be going into an executive session and we will come out of that executive session at some point and then resume the live streaming. So at this point, I would like to turn it over to Catherine, and we will then, once she takes us through her presentation, we'll have time for conversation and questions. Take it away, Catherine.
Great. I am Catherine Benham with the Joint Fiscal Office, and there is a one-page document that I think may be posted on the webpage, and I'm just going to walk through it. Do you want me to share it, or should I just talk and let you all access it on your other screens? It is posting right now, he said. So I'll start talking, and it's pretty straightforward. So I think you all understand, and everybody understands, that the pandemic has changed the way office space is used for both the public and private sector. And clearly it's going to impact the legislature when you return. And when you do return post-pandemic, the space needs for the legislators, for the staff, and the public are likely to be very different than they have been in the past. And so the proposal is to contract with Freeman, French & Freeman to provide a quick review and summary of the likely legislative space needs for both the short and long term. Freeman, French & Freeman has prepared two prior studies for the legislature. That's one reason to go with them. The contract concept is that it would cost under $14,000. It would involve interviews with legislators and staff, as well as research and expertise to produce an analysis. The report would be back mid to late April in order to allow you all to have time to consider what actions are appropriate to think about a successful return. And just very quickly, I'll fill you in on the two reports they did before. They did one that they delivered in January of 2020. It was a review of short-term space needs, and this was all pre-COVID. So they were looking at it from that perspective. That obviously space was used to maximum capacity, was overutilized in the session. There's a lack of meeting rooms. There were issues with various committee rooms, offices, and bathrooms. And they suggested some different uses of space, as well as shifting programs to other buildings within the Capitol complex, like adding capacity to the Pink Lady, which is where the Joint Fiscal Office is, or other office space. So they had put those ideas out in January of 2020. Then once the pandemic hit, the legislature hired them to do another study over the summer, and they delivered that in August. And it was about trying to think about how the legislature, the options for coming back during the pandemic. And they did a variety of options. And we used some of their proposals to set up hybrid committee rooms in case you all want to use them. And in the document that is posted, there are links to both of those studies if anybody wants to read them, and they both have executive summaries. So, in the big picture, space needs were a problem before COVID, and they've been exacerbated by COVID. I think there's a recognition that there's a need to start planning for the next steps for state government to return. And it's the executive branch, the judicial branch, and the legislative branches all need to think about it. And having a long-term plan will certainly help with defining and taking the short-term steps. If you have some vision about how the legislature is going to end up, it will impact what we do in the interim. It's a little bit like those puzzles where you move a piece and the other pieces all have to move. It's the Capitol complex is like that, because all three branches are there. So when one changes some space use, it can impact the other two as well. So the summary is the proposal is to hire Freeman, French & Freeman to do a follow-up study, building on the two prior reports and lessons learned from COVID. They would talk with legislative leadership, legislators, and staff. They would assess the long-term needs for legislative space. provide options and recommendations and the pros and cons of the various options and estimated costs for those options. And let me just be clear, it's not like they're going to have the full solution and the full cost of everything, but they'll be able to give you ballpark costs so you all can think about where you want, which direction you want to head in. The contract would be 4 to 6 weeks, so mid to late April. And I'm going to say $10,000 to $14,000 is the ballpark estimate of that cost. I don't know if I was talking too fast or that's my summary of what we're thinking.
Thank you, Catherine. And for the interest of transparency for the public, can you just remind us the firm that's been hired in the past and just so that we have that clearly on the record?
Sure, it's Freeman, French and Freeman. And they have done the 2 prior studies. This, you can do a sole source contract under, I believe it's 15,000. So this would be, they fit for many reasons. It's not a very big contract. I should also say that we would pay for this out of the legislative budget. There are the funds there to pay for this out of the legislative budget. And they have obviously witnessed the State House in action pre-COVID, and they've also been involved in the post-COVID discussions. So they have a lot of expertise and could turn it around fairly quickly in a way I don't think anybody else could do so at the moment.
Okay. Anything else you want to add, Catherine, before I open it up to questions? Okay. Questions for Catherine about the proposed study? Senator Benning.
I don't know if you need a motion, Senator Ballant, but if you do, I'd like to move that we accept the proposal in order to move the conversation forward.
Thank you. Senator Benning has moved that we accept the proposal and that we can now have a discussion on the proposal. Thank you, Senator Benning. Do I need a second, Senator? I am having trouble with my connection.
We can hear you, Senator Ballant.
You can hear me. You're all frozen on my screen. Okay, so let's open it up to comments, questions. And Jill, everyone's frozen. So if you see anyone wants to speak, you'll have to acknowledge them because
Sure, happy to jump in here. Senator Kitchell.
Okay, thank you. Certainly space has been an ongoing discussion. And so once we get this study, I'm just wondering how, I sound like Donald Rumsfeld, how actionable it will be and where we go from here. Would it propose that, for example, we should put another addition on the State House, get rid of the parking lot and put, X number of committee rooms. I'm just wondering what we should expect from this. God knows we need it. That's not if we're going to ever act on something. But I'm just wondering what the scope will be and what it will provide to us to help us. Under the American Rescue Plan, there's money for capital construction. Maybe this is a time to get off the dime with some of this stuff and move, but we tend to, I guess I've heard the term paralysis by analysis. And so I'm just wondering how we can take what you're proposing here, but then what is our, then we have to be committed to a plan of action afterwards and how that would fit relative to any of the fiscal decisions we're going to be making shortly.
Well, sure. I guess I would welcome input from anybody. I think the thinking is that they would present a variety of options. One, I think, would be in addition to the State House because they actually proposed that in their first study. And could be in addition to the Pink Lady also. It could be putting staff in other committees in other spaces in the Capitol complex. Those all have different price tags, even if you're ballparking it. And I think so the thought right now is that they would come back with options and give you ballpark prices for those options and pros and cons, and you all would make that decision if you want to. You're exactly right about the federal funds. You do have maybe the opportunity to set some of those federal funds aside to prepare for some of these space needs.
Okay.
Representative Leclerc?
Thank you. I'm wondering, are we looking to have the study based on what we used to do prior to the COVID pandemic, or do we have some different expectations as to how we're going to operate coming out of it? In other words, would we have a different study if we were looking at it with a bit more of a higher bred model, incorporating more technology, versus trying to do everything totally in person? Will that be a part of the conversation, and will they be looking at that with part of this study?
We can certainly put that in there. I think it's a question for you all, really. And so I think part of the discussion will be, that should certainly be part of the discussion and part of the options that they lay out. It's a great question about how are you going to come back. I don't think you're going to come back exactly the same way in the same committee rooms. That seems highly unlikely. So it is a good question about are people going to continue to work remotely at all, or how to navigate that is a big piece of this. And I think part of it relying on them is their expertise from what they're hearing also about the national discussions about space, and really thinking, if you think about 5 or 10 years down the road, it's a different landscape than what we're living right this minute, but it's also likely to be different than what we have lived in the past.
And so, Representative Leclerc, the other thing to keep in mind is that Freeman, French, and Freeman did make a series of specific recommendations to us when it looked like we were going to be able to operate in a hybrid model, so that we do actually can use the information that they put forward in the previous study as well to inform this work. Would that be an accurate assessment, Catherine?
That would be. And also, talking to, as they talk, I think a lot of this discussion will be talking to legislators and legislative directors, staff directors, about what we've all learned from working remotely and what works. And I think it's surprising how well it's worked on some fronts. And I think there are frustrations on other fronts. So
was that prior study done with an eye on a shorter term solution or a long-term permanent solution?
Which study are you? There were two.
I'm talking about the one that we had them do as we looked to a hybrid model for this past January.
That was pretty specifically how to come back in January, how to prepare to come back in January. But I think there are lessons learned in that process that Senator Balint is right, you could use. And I will certainly we can put in the scope of work, this attention to thinking about technology and how how do you integrate that going forward?
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? So what I hear the committee saying is we want to have an eye to hybrid issues, to the technology piece, making clear on the scope, and that the scope will give us the information that we need in order for these plans to be actionable. What I heard, not just from Senator Kitchell, but also from other senators earlier this week in talking about this is people, as Senator Kitchell said, perhaps it's time with the federal money to get off the dime here. Anything else? Senator Benning.
Thank you. Part of the mix is deciding, some committee has to decide at some point to take a leap of faith and say, we plan on being back in the building in some form by X date. Mm-hmm. That will help the architects in their estimates, certainly will help BGS, because BGS has been in a roadblock situation of trying to plan. Yep. And this committee, I envision as one of two possible committees that would make that decision, the other being joint rules. But at some point, we've got to stop circling and make a formal decision and commit to a given date. And just, Jane, to go back to your question about expansion, I was reminded by Alice Emmons that the cafeteria was built in such a way that we could expand upwards from the cafeteria. But to make decisions like that, when you've got the money coming down the pike that might enable us to do that, we've got to have some kind of a commitment formally as a legislative entity that we're going to plan on a given date and then have all the planners plan for that occasion. The other thing I should say is right now, our temporary rules, at least in the Senate, have us in a situation where our temporary rules are only in place as long as the governor's executive order is in place. If he pulls the plug on that, we have to address changing our rules.
That's true. So I've made a note of that, Senator Benning, and
Uh-oh. Cut out, Senator Ballot.
Yeah, you're frozen.
legislative colleagues what the plan is for January. Still frozen?
Nope, you're
No.
back.
Oh, you're
You're
back.
back.
Oh, okay. I don't know. I'm in the State House. What's happening?
Oh,
I don't know where you lost me, but I agree, Senator Benning, we need to be sooner rather than later focusing on a date of messaging what our plans are for January. So Speaker Kowinski, I am looking for a motion to agree to Catherine's proposal of,
You have one,
Yeah.
Senator Benning.
Senator Benning had moved.
that's right. I'm so distracted because you're all frozen. So
You're good. You're good.
okay. So do I have, I would entertain a motion to accept the plan. What's the motion? What's the motion I'm trying to make here?
You have one. Senator Benning moved that we
Call
would
for a
accept
vote.
the plan.
Call for a vote. You're all coming in and out with the sound, so it's very challenging. Let's have a roll call vote, just because I can't, nobody's raising their hands. So let's go with the speaker.
Yes.
Okay. I vote yes. Senator Kitchell,
Yes.
Senator Mazza,
Yes.
Senator Benning,
yes.
Representative Colston,
Yes.
Representative Leclerc.
Yes.
Okay. Vote is 7-0-0.
Oh,
No,
Thank you.
701.
one.
Oh,
Janet.
Janet, thank you. It's very disconcerting to try to lead a meeting with everyone's face completely frozen at me. So I apologize. Catherine, thank you so much. At
Yep,
this
thank you.
point, we're going to move on to the second order of business, which it's the personnel matters. And so I will entertain a motion to go into executive session for the purposes of considering personnel matters related to compensation.
So moved.
So moved.
Okay. So it takes a 2/3 votes of those present. So Senator Kitchell,
Yes.
Senator Kowinski, Representative Kowinski,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Senator Benning,
Yes.
Senator Mazza,
Yes.
Representative Leclerc,
Yes.
Representative Colston.
Yes.
Great. Vote is 7-0-1.